Thank you so much for being here. And first of all, I really love to thank Jay Sanders and Artist Space crew. Everybody was so wonderful and giving this space for all of us to celebrate Steve's life. Yes, Steve and I were here before the renovation, and he saw this space. That's incredible. So that's some kind of synchronicity, which I love. And I don't know what to say. It's very emotional, naturally, and it's almost strange, but Steve and I did love each other. We're in love with each other, and we lived like two peas in the pod. Some people say we are connected with a hip, and like Siamese twins. We lived so tightly for 40 years. 40, that's incredible. And it was like a flash. So we wanted to have 10 more years, but that's a little too greedy, so I just kind of accept it now. And now I have to really rearrange my own head to live this new reality, which is going to be a challenge, but I'm totally surrounded with great friends and spirit of everybody who is helping me. And this tribute was done in a complete collective, organic collective effort. I just had an idea. I told people, friends, and they all gave their creative, whatever they had, in such a way, intuitive offering, and everybody just did everything they could do to make this happen. It was really like a social experimentation. No leadership. It's just a shared thought and intention with love. And it happened. Look at this. I was so frightened, to be honest. I was totally frightened. See? So now I feel like we can do the same thing with the society, the world, everything. The shared good intention and the understanding of the thought and the foundation. And then we do whatever, we do the offering to make it happen. Steve says, shut up, you're talking too much.
We ran together back in our youth, eyes wide open for a moment of truth. Up in the spotlight, I remember you. In downtown back alleys, all-night cafes, clear-throated singing, words you used to say, real and true. Oh yeah, I remember you. You listen to me, and I listen too. I'll tell you, I sure was lucky to have a friend like you, real and true. Oh yeah, I remember you. I don't know if there's a heaven. It's some world beyond the sky. But I do believe in memories to have and hold as time goes by. So we'll still run together like way back when, 'cause I can still hear you laughing the way you did then. Real and true, I remember you. real and true. I remember real and true. I remember you. Steve, I'll always love you.
I went to a discussion at Lincoln Center once, and when I got there, I didn't have a ticket, and I didn't have any money to buy a ticket, and so I got to the front, and they wouldn't let me in. So I was strapped, and I didn't know what I was going to do. Suddenly, Steve Dalachinsky appeared, like that. And I saw Steve, and Steve didn't look at the people at the desk who were blocking me. Steve said, "Oh man, you're late. Come on, you got to get in. We've been waiting for you right away." And I went right with Steve without looking at the Lincoln Center people, and I was in. So Steve's thing about getting into places was not just about him. You know, it was for everybody, and that was a very high level of wizardry that Steve possessed. And I always appreciated that. And I had two quick dreams, very quick, with Steve very recently. They're quite abstract, so bear with me on that. The first one, I'm a trumpet player and I practice a lot. And I had a dream where I was practicing, and in the dream, this is not real life, this is a dream. Wynton Marsalis appeared. And he said, "I can hear your progress." And he took a stack of $100 bills and he dropped it at my feet. Then a big gust of wind came and blew the money all over the place. And I was like, okay. And I was looking at Wynton and thinking about probably chasing the money. And this is where it gets weird. Wynton suddenly morphed into Steve Dalachinsky. So I was like, "Steve, what's up, man?" And this is when it got even stranger. Steve proceeded to give me a full lesson on how to write 4-part harmony using diminished chords. So I put this story on Facebook, and this is a few months before Steve left town. And Steve saw the poem that I had, and he said, "Man, I'd love to help you. I wish I really did that, but I don't know a damn thing about any diminished chords." So that was the first one, and the second one is even more abstract, maybe not even a dream. It might sound really crazy, but as for me, I have unusual experiences where I can talk to people after they have ascended. I've talked to Berne, I've talked to Roy Campbell. It sounds crazy, but it's usually music when these kind of things happen to me. And I was practicing in real life, not in a dream. And I often feel the presence of the great Roy Campbell Jr. And Roy and Steve were buddies. They actually had the same birthday. And I was practicing, and I could always feel or hear Roy, and then Roy would actually say things to me, like help me out with trumpet playing and stuff like that. But this particular time, this was after Steve died, I heard a voice that could only be Steve Dalachinsky. And this time Roy wasn't alone. Steve was there. And Steve said to Roy, he said, "Wait, you mean Matt can hear us right now?" And then, and Roy said, "Yeah, watch this." And he goes, "Hey, brother." And I said, "Hey, Roy, what's up, man?" And it sounds like Steve is there. And then Steve said, "It's me." He said, "Miss you, kid." I said, "Steve, man, we miss you too. Peace."
This is a translation from the Therigatha. And I just want to say his spirit is alive and well, but this is the other side of it, which is actually very refreshing. These Buddhist mendicant monks and nuns, although they were wandering mendicants, no monasteries, made impermanence sound sexy. This lady who cremates the dead, black as a crow, she takes an old corpse and breaks off a thigh bone, takes an old corpse and breaks off a forearm, cracks an old skull and sets it out like a bowl of milk for me to look at. Witless brain, don't you get it? Whatever you do just ends up here. Get finished with karma, finished with rebirth. No more bones of mine on the slag heap. And he would say, yeah, Bubba, that's fine. And so this is something written for him. Vibrations, jump, motifs. For Steve Dalachinsky. Form is a possibility. Welter, yes, yet, occult, tabula, arasta, thrastos, bound to a tree. And not tonight. A floating island. Let's mesh the jetty because cool will be heat soon. Ulat Bamsi, an upside down world, a meteoric world. What left? Bereft, bereft, bereft. What heft? Bereft, bereft. Indra's net along. Improvisation. Into the crystallized palace. He liberated our floating islands with all transfiguration today. Let's do it for our friend. And aspiration, not prosaic. The USA is very young, Cecil Taylor. With Albert Ehler and Rudy Nureyev. Any gift you have is not about that. You cringing and crying all about yourself. Not that, not that. We are the transitory poems. Oh, dial a chin. Steve Dalachinsky, dial a chin. Mimesis of mind, the thinker, one who is curious beside these pages. Dial in a chime, dial in a chime. Keys to the city. Poetry's ring. Alexical words, nuclear deterrence. What episodes of life in art records? Do you speak trumpet? Do you speak trumpet? Do you speak sax? Do you speak clavicle? Hey, give notice. What is your sacred mushroom? Comedic gesture toward the eye. What is a normative apocalypse? What does it look like? Raised inquiry. A temper? A temper looks like this. Do you speak horn? How can we be total? How can we be total? And stay steady with a righteous Vajra anger. And you rage. And you strike the gong. Speak drum. Can you speak drum? Gone, 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 gone. Gatte, gatte, paragatte, gatte, paragatte, bodhisvaha. Snowscape you missed, 2020. Then in night I thought of you. Music, beloved of contract. Poetry an ultimate sister ever. In the middle, a positive everywhere. Turn of corners in Paris. La vie après la mort, a stapled form, a venture, the epic of dailiness. Your partner's beauty, oh, you go, 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 go. Oh, you go, you glow. Dalachinsky-esque poems leap across the Bardo. A train, a plane, elliptical memory. Land train, a vein, fashion scrambles. Oh, reason, do without. Non-cusp of the world war for aesthetic, ubiquitous, the lover heard all sounds. Will they change, or you will be extensive on this field, or asleep, or walking, or dreaming, the synchronous clusters. And what is your life seeps into the tradition. Shows up simultaneously, modestly, in the middle mind stream, amidst soft triangles, the lift you see, you like your own, it's a junction for the one who passes through, sitting and rattling. What is a man but an unqualified act in love? Tear emotions from the love you have for the music, origin of psyche, lines appear, form of a gulag, form of a revolution, superimposition, our world. That is an invocation. Osiris in the FedEx, something might explode in flames. Complex anomalia, anatomy of a brain. And what is a man if not this, a sum of brainy parts, teleological image of an eye, moment for the shutter, and weep on a shoulder. Poet destroys the icons. Poet moves freely within vitrines and ventricles, eclipse for the eyes. Dalachinsky asks, what now to serve the masters? Then humblest texture of text spectral, light from bundle of tendencies. Abhidharma, conglomerations, makes a man tick. Who you be? Who you be? Who you be? Human imagination. Tick, 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 tick. Who you be? Literary anagogic irony. The passages shifting slightly. Hermeticist, I've been hankering of invitation to enter a conversation, world of wonder. What is the pivot of 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 the voice piloted, the pivot of the pivot, closure of never-ending friends in the room. Yet here language cuts a synopsis of trance, temperament. Poet flashes, wits exhausted for the long ride towards irony ambient. We see the face, we see the fascia, we see the faces. Is there snow in New York City? Is it not tonight? Time of the merchant seaman. Things happen in rooms on a continent, providing access to spiritual vision. Scaffolding everywhere would tell you the memes, a rhetorical theatrics, a truth of authenticity. You stand there, sure of these resistances. I met you, Steve, close here, standing hair's breadth away, then befell generosity. And all your senses on deck. Oh, shivery!
Dalachinsky!
I consider Steve and Hugo my closest of closest friends. I've known them since the early 80s, and they've been a huge part of my life. Now, there's many beautiful sentiments that have been shared tonight. Early on, Nicole said something about me and Steve and being disarmed by his honesty and just how he was the essence of himself at all times. And Jeff also made a comment about when you met Steve, despite all the verbiage, and because Steve liked to talk, that somehow within the first 20 seconds, he distilled a hologram of the essence of who he was instantly, and you got the whole Steve Dalachinsky experience. I mean, we could cut to the chase. Steve was like one of the most brutally honest, transparent people in one sort of way. I mean, and I've spent many hours talking to him, watching him interact with people. I've seen some unbelievable, brutal honesty. But at the same time, and that there's a good side to that and a bad side to that. At the same time, even though he was transparent in a sort of way, you know, he had so many tentacles. So there was both a transparency and a mystery. Still walking down the street sometimes, if I see an older person, somebody like maybe 10 years older than me, walking down the street, they're a certain height, a certain posture, and I can tell that they're going to a gallery or a film or a music concert. I mean, I think I see Steve. I still have that experience to that day. And it seems unthinkable walking in the streets of New York City and Steve is not going to a concert or a movie. I mean, it just seems unthinkable, and I'm wondering who the next Steve Dalachinsky is going to be. You know, they have quite shoes to fill. Yes, we know that. Steve was the most wonderful mixture of autodidactic, erudite person and a cold stone New York street hustler. And if you wanted to get a sense of that, there's been a lot of mentions of people that first met him when he used to sell on the street. In fact, Harry, his partner, is over here. Harry used to sell art books, and Steve was selling albums. And it's not so much like he was a capitalist. It's not how he was like trying to make the sale. It was just if you watched his interactions with people on the street, which I spent many hours hanging out with him. Yeah, he was a New York street hustler. He was the real deal. You know, despite his incredible depth of knowledge in so many fields. One of the most important things, though, is that he was a really dedicated husband. He often felt that he didn't understand why you put up with him, and I agree with him. Yeah. But you know, he knew that he wouldn't be shit without you. You know, he knew that, and he also deeply admired a certain type of austerity you have within your paintings and poetry that he thought he lacked. You know, he was kind of scared of you in some ways. You know, but. Oh, he said that to me too. But no, he was a deeply devoted. I mean, and you know, I've seen some really out stuff hanging out at your house with you two going at each other. But and he would often call you like, "Why does she put up with me?" Did you? And I would just, you know, be kind of quiet at that point. But you know, talking to Steve on the phone at night, at the end of long conversations, when, you know, you were finally like, I gotta go, Steve, you know, I gotta go. And he would always say, either I love you or I love you, baby. And that just sounded so strange to me, just being how much of a curmudgeon and he's one of my best friends. I mean, I'm saying this lovingly, how much of a curmudgeon and he could be, but he, you know, it really hit me. He really meant that, and he always said that. And I don't think I've ever met any person who cherished other people, because despite his curmudgeonness, he was like one of the most generous people I've ever known, despite the fact that we call him Dalachinsky, and he's known for, you know, getting in concerts and free. I mean, back in the day, before I was, you know, making a little money playing music, I mean, he actually, and I know he's, you know, doesn't have much money, but he actually has offered me money on a few times, you know, to get projects done or to whatever. So, I mean, I don't think I've met anybody that cherishes people to the depth and the way he does, and he will be surely missed.
Yes.
I've known Steve for about 21 years, and I spend a lot of time on Metro North because I live in Poughkeepsie. And I saw an episode of The Twilight Zone recently called Last Stop in Willoughby. And I thought about Steve when I heard that he had passed. And I could imagine Steve on a train, sitting in the car by himself, falling asleep, and the conductor passing through. Willoughby, Willoughby. And Steve awakes and he says, Willoughby, there's no Willoughby on this line. What are you talking about? What the hell is this, the Twilight Zone? Mr. Dalachinsky, this is Willoughby. And I have to tell you, it's a very warm day here in Willoughby in July. July? What are you talking about? This is September. No, Mr. Dalachinsky. It's July. Well, the next time I'm on this train, can you tell me, by the way, what line is this? There's no Willoughby on this line. This is Willoughby, Mr. Dalachinsky. And he falls asleep, and he wakes up again, and the conductor says, Willoughby, last stop in Willoughby. Willoughby, I'm going to get off here. By the way, Mr. Conductor, what time is it? It's 5:03. Thank you.
Hello. I think due to time and space, I'm just going to read a small portion of a poem that Steve wrote called Phenomena of Interference. What's your name? My name is Baird. Hello. I will not say safe. Play safe. Ego is a dynamic lamp which overshadows the moon. The moon is a transparency of false light, a mistook hope that only seems to guide us. Do not be misled by your reflection. It is not you. It is a cloud that swallows knives whole and offers no resistance. It appears as charnel angels appear, more transparent than dream, than light. It offers you a ticket to view yourself, but cannot guarantee your journey beyond the stop requested. It offers safety where there is none. It is magic that makes you think the trick is easy, then fools you again and again. This light, this disappearing angel, a finite clearing. I love you, Steve.
Thank you, Ka.
In the interest of time, I'm gonna to distill my portion into the key phrases. So they'll be a little disjointed, but I promise it'll be quick. The first is freedom. The next is unprecedented openness. And finally, the ability to hear what something feels like. For all these things, I thank Steve Dalachinsky.
Hi, I'm Billy Martin. I'm a drummer. You may know me from Medeski Martin Wood or the Lounge Lizards, whatever. Steve. I last saw Steve at Steve's memorial, the blind guy, Steve Cannon's memorial. Namekins, these guys. When I first met Steve Dalachinsky was at Steve Cannon's gallery. I was having a little exhibit that my girlfriend was curating, and all these incredible people were there. Lawrence Butch Morris, Eddie Bobet, Bruce Lundvall from Blue Note Records, John Farris. But the one that stood out, who I didn't know, was Steve. And it was like someone who, walked in from John Cassavetes' film. I was like, holy shit, this guy is special. There's something about him. And I heard him speak and talking to Steve and Steve talking, and it was just a beautiful thing. And that was about 25 years ago. And after I first met him, I started getting emails from Sky Plums, and I was like hitting me up to get on the list for different shows. They were very small shows. They were intimate shows. I'm like, who is it? Why? Who's this Steve? I didn't remember. And after realizing it was that Steve, he started coming to my shows, hitting me up, and they were always the shows that I was pushing the boundaries of everything I was doing, going beyond, pushing. He was always there, rooting me on there. One time he asked me, he said, look, I can't come to your show, I had a thing at the Drawing Center. So I said, what do you want me to do? He goes, well, can I come to a rehearsal? I said, yeah, sure, you can come to rehearsal. So that was Steve. Everything, he was always there for when I was really pushing myself. So I want to do one quick thing for Steve. This is only for Steve, so don't listen. Love you, Steve. Thank you.
You think Steve heard that? Yeah. Tom Surgal.
All right, thanks a lot. I got a few tributes here from a few people who couldn't be here today. Where's the sound dude? All right, a little loud. Okay, if a tree falls and no one was around to hear it, it's only because Steve was across town at another gig. Or maybe he was on stage breathing fire into his poems, or just hanging out between one show and the next, flexing a self-deprecating sense of humor and chop-busting skills honed since Avenue J doo-wop days, or else welcomed into this family of people who cared so deeply. Steve's physical form may have moved on to catch Sunrise's spirit here, never missing a gig. That's Chris Corsano. I am playing in the city and in Brooklyn, and there is no Steve Dalachinsky. What's wrong with this picture? Everything. To say that I am missing that irascible gray head with those voracious ears is an understatement, an epic understatement. The landscape is irreparably altered. I miss you, Steve, and thanks for the poem. Love, Nels Klein. Steve was always the most critical ear in the club, not only because he was a poet, but by the real fact that he gleaned the essence of musical discipline, where sharing is of equal value to player and listener. He nurtured and was nurturing. He was loving and he was loved. We will forever miss Steve, but he'll always be the first name on our guest list. Thurston Moore. When I think of Steve Dalachinsky, I am immediately in the living presence of a realized individual, realized in the double sense that he had both seen his individuality and had lived his life in accord with what he had seen. The expression self-made man is usually reserved for individuals who have accumulated material wealth and the independence that goes with it. Steve went straight for the independence, living life to the full and being Steve to the even further. As a consequence, he is etched sharp in all our memories and will live on forever. Much loved, Evan Parker. Okay, the rest is me. What a disappointment. Okay. Yeah, I first met Steve some decades ago at St. Peter's Jazz Church in Midtown. What an apt setting for our first encounter, for as we all know, jazz was Steve's religion. Steve was so aggressively friendly at our first meeting that I found it disarming. I mistook his genuinely friendly overtures for sarcasm. I thought he was messing with me. Little did I realize at the time that this was an early indication of who Steve was. Steve was always so keen to connect with people and possessed such an enormous reserve of love and positive energy that it is no wonder that he was the most popular person I have ever known. For a little dude, he had a big heart. Steve and I soon discovered that we had everything in common. Two follically blessed, curmudgeonly native New Yorkers addicted to the arts. My man had a great head of hair. We would talk for hours on the phone about jazz, out and straight ahead, contemporary classical, underground rock, international music, Pantheon Hollywood films, foreign films, art and literature. Steve would also regale me with tales of his colorful past, from his early days in Brooklyn singing doo-wop on the corner, to his adolescent roaming the village, soaking up the bohemia, to his stint in the nut house. I once read an old interview with Joe Zawinul in Downbeat, where the reporter was asking what advice he could give young, aspiring musicians. Should they just intensely practice all the time, the reporter queried. Zawinul responded, no, man. They should get drunk, get laid, live a life, have something to say. Steve lived a life. Steve had something to say. Steve was, as is well documented, always on an unrelenting quest to experience aesthetic beauty in all its multifarious forms. He went to every screening, every opening. He even had his favorite perches from which to observe the daily sunsets. But he most famously went to every gig. Almost every gig I ever attended and virtually every gig I ever played, Steve and Yuko were always there. There were times when I would look out in the audience and they were the only people there. We've all played those shows. Steve and Yuko's undying support became so vital to our community that their backing became integral to the very music we played. After a while, they didn't just make the scene, they were the scene. I've always subscribed to Miles Davis's credo that I only played music for myself and my fellow musicians, but as time ensued, I learned to include Steve and Yuko in that class as well. Steve was, of course, no mere observer. He was an artist in his own right who worked hard to create his poems and collages, yet more means for him to engage with the sublime. Steve had nothing and did everything. He was poor in terms of material wealth, but rich in experience and friends. He took full advantage of every cultural offering that New York could provide him. He should have been awarded the key to the city. He certainly held the key to our hearts. Steve and I did everything together. He was like a brother to me, the best friend I ever had. His loss is incalculable. I just so value the time we had together. Yuko has told me that we should always speak of Steve in the present tense so as to keep him alive in our hearts and minds. I will conclude them by proclaiming, I love you, Steve. I miss you, Steve. I'll never forget you, Steve. One last bittersweet note. And to all the sanctimonious door people who would begrudge Steve the price of admission, you won't have to worry about Steve Dalachinsky anymore. He's moved on to a bigger venue. And you can all go fuck yourselves. Dalachinsky lives!
I was climbing among the rocks when I looked down to the river and I saw it, an eagle lifting from the trees. And I knew that someone was going to die. Someone good was going to die. There's nothing you can do when you see that eagle. Nothing you can change. And the price we pay for love is the pain of loss. I keep holding on, don't want to let it go. I keep holding on, this is all I know. And I throw away, and I throw away another breath of time. storm, come swell my dream. Come fire, come dragon, come burn me clean. Give me $2 silver. Pay the boatman all the line. Oh, I'm coming to the end of my days. Oh, I'm coming to the end of my days. Nobody's mentioned yet how Steve always wrote on scraps of paper. I don't think I ever saw him writing on a plain, clean piece of paper. It was always a flyer of some sort, right? And I remember him hunched over with his pencil, scribbling away on some piece of scrap paper when Loren was playing at the Whitney Museum. And one day he posted it online, and he said, here is a poem I wrote at the gig. 4 darks on red, an engagement between Loren Connors and Mark Rothko at the Whitney Museum, August 29th, 2015. It's not so much that it radiates or vibrates, not so much how color climbs inside the body and vice versa. Sometimes a nasal wind, a flurry of flat yet elusive fingers, neither accepting nor rejecting, passive comings gone. It is, however, like those waves she spoke of. I'm looking at you, you go. So many long years ago, way back then, within an ocean of meat and meat hooks, is there a word to describe quiet titillation, a succession of indiscreet secrets and secret indiscretions? His shoes could have easily painted the dark area black, but not quite black, and the paint could have easily overpowered and empowered his fingers, challenged, guided, become the bridge that was white wall and empty space, bridged by the neck of his guitar. The suicide becoming the life force, sound becoming color, color becoming sound. The way it all falls toward the bottom of the canvas, but never quite falls off. An illusion of intention, all remaining in its allotted place on that rare occasion where paint encounters, blends with and interprets the music. He glances up toward its movement briefly, then rises. The sound of color, the color of sound, enfolding. Steve.
Here I am, between 2 bridges where Brooklyn used to be. And here I am, between 2 rivers where Manhattan used to be. And here I am, between 2 oceans where America used to be. Here between sky and earth, where there are no boundaries, where night and wind are wed, that's me. Dancing in the grass. Thank you.
And I think, what is the most generous thing a person can do? What is the greatest gift? to be there, to be there. He was always there.
Collage 42. Let's talk about collisions. How one body impacts another. Easy choices, better ways to combine our love. No better way to make one's living for today, tomorrow, seamless Mondays, springs, summers, rolling down your favorite hill like water flowing from a tap, you, a cloud, tapping on my window if I had a window that close to the ground, or if you a ladder, you'd still make it on time for brunch, or your next career, a painting, a handyman, around collision point to make things easy, beautiful, seamless, a passionate new breed of stargazers, re-entering the atmosphere from the Jersey side, at the apex where the river meets the sky, a wireless tightrope walker, at the height of freedom in free fall, falling on air in any season at one's own convenience, something you can bank on, your words or language or less, naked knees forming irregular circles through the holes in your celestial birthmark, your love of science, of horses, your ability to combine heaven and earth, and how the hairs grow on one's head and are made to stand up on end, how to move things long or short distances, how to move or less move things around to avoid collisions at all costs while colliding chapter and verse with your beliefs, held momentarily in the station to avoid further collisions with the solar system. Salute, Steve.
Hi, Bubby. This is Steve D. We just met. You said I could inundate you with questions, so I'm going to be brazen. And he was. And he wrote to me a number of times over the last year and a half, but almost always to advocate for another writer who he thought deserved some due. And so I just want to share very brief remarks about what I've learned from him as a builder of culture through friendship. Steve was at the Poetry Project multiple times a month, sometimes weekly, and beyond that, he was regularly in touch to let us know with unrestrained, clear, lovable, deeply loving candor what he thought about the state of things in our particular hamlet of poetry. He was full of conviction, though never litigious, full of honest admiration and devotion and time, I thought, unhurried, I mean, even as a habitual maker of 3 plans a night, a prolific poet and correspondent, a sensitive and passionate reviewer of music. How are you so everywhere and constantly, I've wondered. And it strikes me that the easy capaciousness of Steve's presence owes to the utter attention of his pleasure. He was rich, it seems, most of all with listening, to which he brought the passionate dedication of both his intelligence and humility. He didn't mince or perform or maneuver. He was here and himself. I learn from Steve that we become magicians of time when we conduct ourselves authentically and completely with love.
Maine, Marsden Hartley's Maine. My own education began in my native hills, going with me. An artist illuminates his emotions as waves crash on rocks.
Stitched gestures stretched, a stitched sketch, i.e. lumberjack, old man rocking chair, furious flurry of single strokes, animated summer, Theovani Seganti, serrated Syrah.
Landscape seen from far away looks abstracted veins of autumn leaves, mountains as alive as so is the sky and myself.
Optically autoglowed for Reed. The stifled enactment, no more imitating the father.
I am in the midst of a blizzard. Is winter chaos describing little visions of the great intangible is no one but to nature itself.
Song no longer become you, your loneliness shady.
Untitled landscapes in 4 seasons intensify senses of twilight of the moment.
Begin in the woods, intangible, palpable chaos. Okay, the next poem is...
New poem.
Yep, new poem.
Passage is demonic in a dark landscape of my cluttered personal life.
Forsaken, transcendent, penile resurrection.
Dark mountains make clouds whiter than they are. I owe nothing to anybody. In this isolation, even the blueness of the sky becomes almost black.
Dark landscape surrounded by pretentious onlookers.
Do not desert me. I am not afraid, but I hate to be alone.
A search for permanence.
An abandoned and storm-tossed leaf is me, who are forgotten now to dream or wish anything. Moonlight saturated with a symbolic weight of darkness crushes me. Who is nothing?
I commend thee to the cove where riders convey their cloudiness.
I have to take a serious breath to digest what my eyes see. Oh, hills, mountain, rocks, water, sky, I am.
Fingerprints on the clouds.
And a waterfall that never ceases to be critical and majestic.
Becoming the paint.
As I expect the welcome of the prodigal.
And a final poem, Breaking Shapes.
Breaking shapes, to let forms form in their own account and whims, is not us to decide where we are heading to. Colors recedes in a new passage of general familiarities.
Degas digs in. Lift the pigs up from the mold. Curly strangulate the very landscape and dance, you fools. Separate them feet. Lighten up them toes. You ain't worth much more than a whore. Tug the bronze right off your ass, then pass and tell.
A woman, a nude, a muse. A tyranny of subconsciousness.
Rousseau, Picasso, Sock'em artillery, footfall, ironing the hoof, moan, drain.
I wished others to share my joy. A rich man stated, an unknown painter, born in an unknown compositional uncertainty, paints portraits of classical music bathed in the smell of incense on hanging waves. Walls, okay, walls, excuse me, walls. Composition B, composition 8, B and 8. Share the recognizable sense of gravity and the tableau.
Composition 8. I got to feel those paint pictures so deeply I wanted to live with them. Now, older than death, this art of tomorrow, shag all ya club fruit pussycat, fly baby, fly. Get that page over.
And to end.
From shtetl to shadle to shadle. Paris is so crooked. Just look at that Eiffel Tower. I fell yet again as you towered over me, and noodlin', us smokers given up.
And to end it,
That's it.
I must hurry. I must hurry off this letter, for I feel more abstractions coming on. Vincent van Gogh.
Yesterday I went to the Women's March. It's kind of a long story, but I kind of never found the march. But I did end up wandering through Times Square with this sign, so I thought I would show it to you. Those of you that can't see it, it says, "Free the future." When? Let's have a lot of counter heckling in honor of Steve. My esteemed colleague here, Sylvia Gorelick. This is a little song called "I Dreamed I Saw Dalachinsky Last Night." I dreamed I saw Dalachinsky last night, alive as you or me. Says I, but Steve, you're 4 months dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. The uptown poets killed you, Steve. They wore you down, says I. Takes more than a stroke to kill a man, says Steve. I didn't die, says Steve. I didn't die. And standing there as big as life, and smiling with his eyes, Steve says what they forgot to kill went on to improvise. Went on to improvise. Dalachinsky ain't dead, he says to me. Dalachinsky ain't never died. Where poets moan to a saxophone, Dalachinsky's at their side. Dalachinsky's at their side. Wherever a poet heckles his friends and uses profanity, and later says, I love you a lot, it's there you'll find Dalachinsky.
It's there you'll find Dalachinsky. I dreamed I saw Dalachinsky last night, alive as you or me. Says I, but Steve, you're 4 months dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he.
It's hard to say when, but I met Steve somewhere in the 70s, I guess, when he was selling cassette tapes on the street. And we quickly found out we shared many musical interests. And he gave me a tape of John Coltrane playing at the Chicago Playboy Jazz Festival with Archie Shipp, a very beautiful, rare, unreleased recording. And then he also gave me a bootleg Frank Zappa tape of the Mothers playing at a party in the 60s somewhere. So we developed a good relationship from that. We also had a long-time relationship with Cecil Taylor, who I was fortunate enough to play with for many years, and also with the great Gloria Trop, a wonderful poet and vocalist. And Gloria always used to call Steve Dalla, 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 Dalla. Dollar. Trop scats gloriously to the last of the big red hot time vendors, splendors, and the sounds of freedom marching to the next gig, a bite out of the forbidden fruit of the more bidden hidden sonic hieroglyphs contained in the sacred and profane tone and word we wrote and heard in saxophonetic poetics. At 4 a.m. for dollar. The long, hot, summarized night music tried to remember the Ides of September, equinoxed opportunity cocked, blocked. But in plain fonts of quatrain mounts, a train fills out a filly, whole mills of threads and thrills of fabric of Lower East European side slap dash gypsy solar power out to lunch for your ears on a squint to hear with no fear for the truth as we know it from the poet. That was a piece I wrote the night that I heard Steve passed, and I was getting ready to go back to Philly, where I've been living for many years, all my life pretty much, but New York's been my other home, and those are the words that came to me that night. It was a profound night for sure. And the last thing I just want to offer is I played one of the many gigs that Steve came to that I was involved in was one with the saxophone choir, Odine Pope at the Blue Note. And Prince Lachey was a guest, James Carter, Joe Lovano, Michael Brecker. And Steve, at the end of the concert, Steve wrote this poem and he gave it to me, so I wanted to share it with you. Odine Pope, sax choir at the Blue Note with special guests, James Carter and Prince Lachey. Bent on, indeed, wedged in pop and ode to living when hope belieth Odine, the great axe-wielding dean of oddliness. This is faster than as slow as it gets. Pope, he proclaimed, Pope, an ode, Dios míos, and Edo is a long-gone center as empires go. Pop into Eden after chores at the core of the hour. Nine Horns Orbital Riot. In the house, he said, Philly's in the house, as he removed the special guest, Vanolo Carter of Breckeriness. Still, the fractured volume is weighted by such particles of light. Steve Dalachinsky, Blue Note, December 14th, 2004. Thank you.
It's a dream, and John Kruth says that everything really happened. Here it goes. Fresh white horse for Steve Dalachinsky. I must have been dreaming because everything seemed so vivid. It seemed like the trees were doing Tai Chi. Their branches were reaching gently to the stars as the wind sighed, exhausted by all this blowing back and forth and back, and day after day, hoping some melancholy flute player might happen along, offering to fill in for a few hours as I stood on the edge of the pines at midnight, waiting, listening for the hoofbeats of your weary horse. I stood waiting like a stable boy at the edge of the world when I saw your white hair reflecting the autumn moonlight as you appeared atop a shiny black steed, riding bareback Dalachinsky with your arms around its neck and a black cloak draped around you, wide-eyed, bewildered by your new circumstance. You jumped down to the ground. I don't have much more time, booby, you said. I need to be gone before the dawn. What are you, Zorro or something, I said, hoping to lighten the mood. And then you hugged me and kissed my cheek as you often did. I knew it would be the last time I felt your bristly beard brush against my skin. I offered you a knapsack with a fresh-baked pie inside and a thermos of hot coffee, uncertain of your appetite since your sudden death last Sunday. I'm not hungry, you grumbled, and leapt atop the fresh white horse I held waiting. Funny, I never remembered you being so agile in life, shuffling down New York City sidewalks, disheveled in your greatcoat. The animal reared, its nostrils flared, like in that fucking portrait of Napoleon crossing the Alps. And then you were gone. You were gone, disappearing into a strange new neck of the woods. John Kruth for Steve Dalachinsky.
T. I.
L.
T.
S.
They are neither black, Latino, or white. They are neither black, Latino, or white. They are not workers, businessmen, or artists. This is
what is left of a neighborhood when the rents are raised, when the banners come down, when the poor are forced to go elsewhere, paid to go elsewhere, decide to go elsewhere, die or become rich enough to own what they could not afford. Yet they still insist that they will die protecting it, but bound for an entirely different motive, which is never Culbertson.
Zone.
Drunk riddle, pedestrians, drunk on their own dissatisfaction, discourse, displacement, dissimilitude, dissimulation, echo the poets and speech makers, the clean I'm so many do-gooders, the artists and artists all for a barrel of laughs as they,
the artists
bottom
and
of the
artists,
barrel, lock, stock, and
all
barrel,
for a
to a
barrel
circle
of
of
laughs
laughs themselves.
Bring the bottom of the barrel, lock, stock, and barrel, to assert a little piece of themselves.
A bit of color splashed here, there, whitewashed like Tom Sawyer's fence, piss stained, whitewashed by slogans, while dangling from the wrecker's ball. And me singing to myself all the while, 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 and me singing myself all the while, and me singing to myself all the while, and me singing to myself all the while, and me singing to myself all the while.
Play notes.
Write notes, send notes, tear notes, bend notes, read notes, spend notes, hear notes, lend notes, play notes.
Count. Count the figures in the shadow on the wall, hinted at or speculated upon your two hands, the forelegs of a chair, pointing toward the speaker, counting off with your thumbs. First one, then the other, your concentrated expression settling in the dark avenues of night. Count, 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 down the figures in the shadow walking towards you as they exit. Count, count the figures in the shadow of the wall, hinted at, speculated upon,
He drowns himself in thought. He drowns himself in thought. He drowns himself in thought. Drowns himself in thought. He drowns himself in thought. He drowns himself in thought.
He cannot have,
He drowns himself in thought. 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 He drowns himself in thought.
He drowns himself in thoughts. Down below the level of hearing, he thinks he hears.
Down below the level.
But since he thinks that he is not he, not he, not it,
himself.
Since there is no land, no land, no well, no quench of thirst. Since he is not a
secrets left to keep, none to remember, none to forget, since there is no honey, no land, no well, no oasis to quench a thirst he cannot have, since he is not a man, since he is not even he, drowns himself in thought.
Yay, Edwin, you are the fucking best.
All right.
You've been drafted into the poetry lab.
By the time I had the painting lessons, I had established two of my favorite books already. The two most important books to me are still The Churkendoose and The King and the Princess, about a dog and a cat. Both books center around how you can be different, but you should help each other. In The King and the Princess, there was a big flood. The cat got on the dog's back, and the dog saved the cat, and the king and the princess got along forever after. The Churkendoose is about a barnyard. Now, this animal was born part chicken, part turkey, part duck, and part goose. Hence the name Churkendoose. Every animal in the barnyard would pick on him. They bullied the Churkendoose to no end. But one day a fox comes into the barnyard to kill and eat, and he goes through half the animals in the barnyard, and what happens? The Churkendoose comes out to see what's going on, and the fox sees this weird-looking combo. The Churkendoose scares the shit out of the fox runs away, and the Churkendoose becomes a hero in the barnyard, right? So all the ones who made fun of him and bullied him now love him. The moral of the story was that it depends on how you look at things. Now, other than the Odyssey, informing almost all the poetry I've written since I was 18 or 19, I guess without articulating that rule, it depends on how you look at things, is probably the foundation of my life. I always thought people looked at me like I was the Churkendoose. That's what Steve said. So, and when I wrote this down because I was afraid I'd forget. So when I first met Steve and Yuko 35 years ago, it was at the old knitting factory on East Houston Street in the Knot Room, and they had their poetry series that they ran, and I definitely felt like a Churkendoose going to those. And I thought that Steve and Yuko were very, very sophisticated and distinguished. I thought Steve was very handsome and professorial, and I thought that they were relatively old. And now, when I see the photos from those days, so many of which have been here, I'm shocked. I'm shocked at how young they were. And in fact, Gabe Yara, Bobby's son, just also said, in addition to the Colombo thing, Steve and Yuko, they were young once. And I am now so much older than you and Steve were then. You looked so dewy, but I still, to this day, I always think Steve and Yuko are so distinguished, so elegant, so beautiful. And the thing is, Steve and I over the years would have sometimes spectacular arguments on the street. I suggested on occasion to Steve that he was an irksome person. And then but funny enough, the irksome quality became the thing that I loved most, because in addition to that, the truth is, Steve Dalachinsky, this decent and wonderful man, is really actually one of the most generous, one of the least judgmental and most fair-minded, open-minded people I've ever met. So that's what I have to say. I waited to say this for a long time, and I love you, Steve and Yuko, forever. And thank you so much for the friendship for so many years.
I think I have the notebook that everybody signed to read. I think I have a notebook, the Romy Ashby's signature from the 35 years ago in knot room in knitting factory.
Those words are for Steve. Whether or not you will receive them, you've eaten life too fast for my taste. I wasn't prepared to imagine New York City without you. You were one of those people making the city so unique, so possible. How lucky we were to have access to you. Intimately, there was this understanding we had because you and Yuko, your love, were a bit like Wayne and I. Our collaborations were done in the spirit of love. You were always giving as much as possible of your time, presence, and enthusiasm to our project. You exalted life, unafraid of speaking out, unapologetic about what is good and bad, yet always trying to compromise toward a friendly and humorous outcome. You were generous of yourself, ready to give your soul to people in the name of love. This is why Wayne and I, we loved you pretty unconditionally. I was never angry, but consumed with fear when you insisted to leave the mountain house. You insisted to leave in the middle of Hurricane Irene. You were taking Jerry, Perry, Yuko, and my dear husband with you in our old minivan. You had complained about the smell of dead mice in the walls of your room. You turned antsy when we lost the water pump due to power outage, making the bathroom and the kitchen no longer usable. And your commitment to stay broke as the night came and we prepared for a candlelight evening. You had to return immediately to New York City. Your will was as strong as a hurricane. I'm thankful to those higher spirits for having the state troopers stopping you all because of state of emergency, asking you to return to the mountain house. Thankful for the van not having been swept away by the collapsed bridge on which you drove twice, back and forth, in the middle of Irene. It took us 9 hours to drive back. This is why we were kept here for more than 9 hours. It's vengeance from him. It took us 9 hours to drive back to New York City the day after, on what would have been a 2 hours ride, a true adventure. For a while, you thought we were upset at you, but we never were. That only created stronger memories with you and Yuko, engraved in the depths of our experiences. You were too lovable to ever be upset at you. Thank you for having been such a good friend. You were funny, welcoming, generous with information, with sharing your friends, not only a friend to many, but also a resource. Now there is a thirst, unquenched. We miss you and always will. I truly hope there should be fairness in this infinite space. If you run into Perry, Raymond, Rashid, Julius, or Annie and all of those out-of-this-world friends, give them a big hug from us. We can trust you on knowing how to embrace people. Tell them that the living never stops loving the departed. We love you, Steve.
This is about time. And I know about time because I'm an artifact of time. I'm so old, I remember when it was hip to be an existentialist. When Candida was a play by George Bernard Shaw, and when a crack salesman was a compliment. When the air was clean and sex was dirty, but it was only dirty in those days if you did it right. Okay, on to time. I'm glad it's not that way anymore. The time has come. We are all passengers on this planet's transmutation highway, riding within the endless galaxy expressway through the celestial time clocks of eternity, passing through the corridors of time in many manifestations of continual transformation, ever assembling and recombining into different forms of life species, all connected to an invisible threads of biochemical, electrical, magnetic fields of waves and particles, composing and decomposing, shape-shifting space in our planet, which grows many people and creatures of many kinds and many colors. For diversity is Earth's bounty, and our very bodies have a connection with the Earth's botany, for our ancestral homes are all in the elements of nature. As time dances on with its fabric of flora and fauna, for our scientific ancestors foretold that matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed, and the only absolute is change itself. For time is relative, as the moving picture of eternity rolls on, and eternity, we are told, is in love with the productions of time. Yes? I just want to say in closing that one day we're all going to die, but until then, every day we're going to live. So let us look for life and beauty and splendor and wisdom, and let us try to prevent this planet from being destroyed by the Trump apocalypse and you know, all the animal species that we all lost. It's unbelievable what's happening. We're on the edge of catastrophe. This poem will be expanded to include all the animals and other things in time. Anyway, this is for everybody, and it's the Steve, both Steves, and all of you, and all the creatures of the earth. Thank you.
Now the last video piece, Steve was in